I'm your host, Michelle Marchant Johnson, and I'm so happy to have you here so that you can hear from wonderful experts on the theme of how to invite, ignite, and inspire love and passion with your Mr. Right. So I'm excited to welcome a guest here with us today, and that is Ken Bechtel. Welcome, Ken.
Oh, Michelle, thanks for having me. It's great to be back.
Thank you so much for joining us again, and I know what you have to share is going to be incredibly valuable to the women in the audience, and that we're going to have a juicy conversation today. So before we get started, I just want to share a little bit more about you. For over 15 years, Ken Bechtel, the creator of the Finding Mr. Right system, has shared his insights and amusement as a speaker, educator, and relationship coach to help women consistently get their needs met so they can develop happy, healthy, long-term relationships. He is also the host of the wildly popular Speaking of Partnership podcast that is heard in over 60 countries around the world. You can join Ken to learn from the world's leading relationship experts and hear their personal stories of partnership success and failure. And you can join Ken on that series at speakingofpartnership.com. So I know, Ken, we're going to talk about an interesting topic today, and I think this is a fun one. I love that you talk about this and that this is a theme for you, and that is stop chasing maybes and find your Mr. Right. So I wonder if you can tell us why this has become one of your themes in some of the things that you share with single women.
Yeah, thanks for asking, Michelle. It's actually kind of interesting how it came about, because what was happening is I was working with women and helping them to develop their relationships. And I kept hearing all these women basically justifying why they were settling in their relationship. And I'd hear them say over and over again, well, maybe this will work, or maybe this is going to be okay, or maybe that's enough for me. And I realized they were chasing maybes. They were chasing the possibility that they could survive on enough instead of actually thrive in their relationships. And so I realized we needed to look at that. What was going on? Why is that the baseline that so many women were operating from, thinking that that's all I'm really gonna get out of this. So I got to figure out how to survive in this environment and just put up with the maybe instead of going for actually finding somebody who really fulfills their needs. So that's where it came from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and why do you think that, from your perspective, Ken, why do you think that so many women have been tempted or have been willing to settle for maybes? What do you think's underneath all of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, what I found in working with women about this is there's a lot of uncomfortableness with owning what you need. And what I mean by that is, everybody has needs. We all do. I mean, you have certain needs for the amount of food you eat and the type of food you eat and how much sleep you get and exercise and everything else in your life. And yet for some reason, we've kind of come off with this idea that we've correlated if you have a need, that equals being needy. Mm-hmm. And everyone knows people don't want someone who's needy. Well, there's actually not a straight line correlation between those two because we all have needs. We're kind of like, it's funny. It's like if you think about plants, right? Every plant in the world has a different combination of, sunlight and water and soil temperature and all those different things for it to be its best. And we don't sit there and look at a plant and go, what are you, stupid? What do you need all that water for?
Right.
We don't judge it for its needs, but we judge ourselves for what we need. And what happens is that judgment makes us go, that's too much to ask, or that's excessive, or who am I to deserve that? And so we start giving those things up instead of recognizing that if we want to thrive, if we want to be if we use that analogy, the most thriving plant possible, we need to be really clear about what our needs are, or else we're going to compromise ourselves. And so unfortunately, we've actually collectively agreed that compromise is better than the possibility of somebody going, yeah, if you need that, I'm not I'm not looking to do that for you. See, the fear is that there's no one that will really fulfill our needs. So we have to start compromising because we're just lucky to find somebody in the first place. Mm-hmm. And that's where we start backing up, and pretty soon we're not getting our needs met at all. We're living in the land of maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is so interesting, and I love that we're having this conversation. There's an exercise that I take my private clients through at the very beginning of our relationship, working together, where I help a woman get deeply in touch with what her deepest love, wants, and needs really are, and why those would feel so amazing and so fulfilling as a part of a primary love relationship or partnership. And some of the things that you're talking about here do tend to come up. It's women have stopped believing in the possibility of having those things, so they've stuffed those deepest needs or wants down inside to the point sometimes where they're not even in touch with them. Or as their deepest love, wants, and needs come to the surface, they're kind of excited, but also a little bit afraid that would it even be possible to even hope for this again? And so from my perspective, what you're talking about is so profound, because if we're not even in touch with what would really make our hearts sing, so to speak, in a relationship, how can we create that inspiring vision and hold out for that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so it feels like a really fundamental piece, and yet I think you're right. I think a lot of women, because they have been disappointed or hurt or maybe had a relationship that didn't work out, are almost afraid to acknowledge the needs or even recognize that they're there. And if they do recognize they're there, they're afraid to go for it or to hold out for it, so to speak. And so then I think a woman can get into a place that we can call fantasy, right? Where she's fantasizing about one thing, but believes that her reality has to be something else.
Yes, and I think to add to that, Michelle, a lot of times what I found is women have convinced themselves that their needs are why their relationships didn't work. When they were going, I really need this from you, and he wasn't willing or able to provide that for her, she's like, see, if I hadn't needed that, we'd still be together. And so we start to go, our needs are the problem, when the needs are actually what makes you be the best you. It's what lets you come to life in that relationship. So it's one of those beliefs that's kind of come up. And the other place that I see this is oftentimes a woman will look at, her girlfriends and other women in her life and go, well, they're settling, so I guess that's just the norm. And that's really a life-threatening behavior, because what's happening is you're giving up your life to just be the same as everybody else. Well, everybody else is kind of struggling, and that's just the norm. We should just expect that. I'm ridiculous. I mean, yeah, there's some fairy tales, like you said. There's these fantasies of people that actually have it. That's on TV. They get their needs met, but in real life, that never happens. And that's false.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what would be your advice or your wisdom that you would like to share with women who may have felt like they have been or are caught in this trap of settling for maybe? Sometimes I call them Mr. Right Nows, right? It's not Mr. Right, but it's Mr. Right Now. And I know in my own dating life, Ken, there were periods of time where I knowingly went into and or stayed in a relationship that I knew was more or less a Mr. Right Now relationship. And it was because A, I wasn't sure I could really have what I wanted, and B, I was afraid to let go of Mr. Right Now and step out there into the unknown. So I wonder just what general words of advice or guidance you would give to women that have been or are trapped in this pattern.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things. First thing is, understand that one of the reasons why it gets scary to really own what you need is that fear that what if they don't want to do that and then they go away? Because one of the biggest drivers, one of the strongest drivers in the feminine life is connection. So anything that possibly compromises connection is bad. Mm-hmm. So if me owning that I really need whatever it is, time to myself, I need 10 hours of sleep a night, whatever that is, if I'm afraid and I have any belief, even the smallest belief that could sever the connection with that person, I'm not going to do it. Because that connection is such a driver because it creates safety. So the real trick here is understanding that the deeper connection happens when you own your needs and you partner with the person. I kind of look at it like, imagine that you're a fire. Okay, so you're a fire burning. And, most everybody's attracted to fire. Wow, it's nice, it's warm, it's pretty. So people love fire, but you're not just looking for somebody who loves that fire, that light that you're looking for somebody who not only loves that, but they can't wait to feed the fire. They want that to just keep going and growing, and they want that to continue. So it's not like, oh, she showed up really great one day and that was nice. No, this is somebody who's like, I want you to be your most complete self. And we're going to partner to make that work. Whatever you need, I need to know because I can't guess it. And you need to just own that I'm here for you. I'm going to actually support you. So when women have gotten to the point where they're not trusting that, one is what you talked about, Michelle. You've got to get in touch with what your needs are. And so many people have no idea. Mm-hmm. They've never really thought about it. Because what they're doing is, most people, when we're looking out for a partner, we're looking for what do I need from them? Who do I need them to be? Not who do I need or what do I need for me to show up in my fullest? So first you've got to get in touch with it. And then you've got to do something I call shifting from focusing on forms to feelings. Because forms are, what we all do. We got our checklist. Oh, I want him to be, over 6 foot tall, and I want him to have a full head of hair, and I want him to drive a nice car, and whatever we have on our little checklist. Mm-hmm. These are forms. These are external. They change continually, right? Somebody could have a full head of hair today, and 3 years from now, not. So you can't count on that. But how you feel when you're with somebody tells you if your needs are being met. So if you don't feel safe, well, then your need for safety is not being met. If you don't feel empowered, then there's something missing. So your feelings are unarguable. They're your guidance. That's that internal guidance system. So when you're with a guy, you're better off to pay attention to how am I feeling? As opposed to, oh, does he have these things? And checking off your checklist. So throw the list away and actually focus on your feelings. And it doesn't mean that just because you're with a guy and you're like, I don't know, I don't feel super great around him. That doesn't mean, throw him in the trash heap. That's when you got to own your needs. Hey, I'm feeling like, there's something here that isn't matching up. And you have to get honest with yourself and actually ask yourself, what am I needing here? Oh, I feel like he's moving too fast. Then I need to tell him I need some more space. It's you owning what your needs are informs him of what he needs to provide for you, because men are hardwired to be providers. So the more you can tell him what that is he needs to provide, then you'll find out. If he's willing to, fantastic. If he's not, the sooner you find that out, the better. So really it's about getting in touch with your needs and then focusing on how you're feeling to let that know if your needs are indeed being fulfilled.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that you brought this up, and it made me think of something that I want to emphasize here that you said, Ken, and that is about being in touch with your feelings. Because I do believe, from a woman's perspective, one of the greatest gifts we're given is what we might call that women's intuition. You can call it your gut feeling, whatever you might want to call it. And my experience for myself and in working with other women is when we don't pay attention to that, and when we ignore that or we suppress what's going on, then it typically leads us down an unhappy path ultimately. And yet it comes back to this whole idea of being in touch with our deepest love, wants, and needs. We also have to be in touch with our feelings. And as we're out there in the routine of the day or competing in the world, supporting ourselves, doing the things that we might need to do professionally and in other areas of our life, some of these natural feminine gifts, I think, can be diminished or ignored or suppressed. And it typically doesn't lead a woman into the place that will bring her the most joy in terms of a relationship, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then another thing that came to mind as you were speaking, Ken, is that a lot of this seems based in vulnerability. So even as we say the word vulnerability, and I want to hear your take on vulnerability in a moment, even as we say the word vulnerability, I can almost feel women out there shuddering, right? It feels so scary, because I think as human beings, it feels so scary because we want to look good, we want to avoid looking bad, and we want, like you said, we want that connection, and anything that threatens that connection feels very scary. And so showing our vulnerability, part of which is our needs and our wants, just feels terrifying to a lot of women, and I'm sure to some men as well. But we're talking to women today. And when I think of vulnerability, and I want to hear your thoughts on this right after I say this, when I think of vulnerability, I think of it not only as our sharing our fears or our weaknesses or what we perceive as our flaws, but it also includes being able to share fully our hopes and our dreams and our aspirations, and, like you were saying, the things that a man could provide to us that would make us feel so wonderful and so good. So it's like accepting that full spectrum and being able to feel safe to share that full spectrum of who you are.
Yeah, it's so true. And I agree with you. I can totally feel, the women that are watching this going, I can't do that. That's terrifying.
Right.
I get that. It is scary because you're hardwired to have that connection that creates safety. Well, who wants to go someplace that doesn't feel safe? Very rarely will we volunteer to do that, right? What happens, though, is it's getting past the mindset that me being me is scary. If you're not willing to do that, well, then you're going to have people that don't really ever know you. And that's the scariest thing, is to really not be seen and not be understood. So what happens with vulnerability is, I always tell people, I don't know very many people who can really expand their comfort level with vulnerability by themselves. Mm-hmm. And the reason I say that is, of course, all our innate triggers will go, nope, don't go there. Nope, don't do that. Nope, don't do that. But when you have somebody supporting you, whether it be Michelle or myself or, a good friend that can go, you're good, you're okay, we're fine. It's just like when you're a little baby and you're learning to walk. That's pretty vulnerable. They're getting around just fine on their butt or crawling around on their hands and knees. They're happy. And all of a sudden something makes them try and get up and walk. And that's a vulnerable space to be. But what's happening is we go, that's okay, because think about it. The first step a baby takes as an adult, would you count that as a step? No. But we're like, that's great, you've made progress. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing. It's going to be baby steps because you spent your whole life believing that it's not safe to be yourself. And the more you can do that, the more you can feel that safety, because almost every one of us has that feeling of safety to be vulnerable with someone. Maybe it's a best friend, maybe it's a family member. You don't think twice about being vulnerable with them. So you have the ability. Now it's a matter of transferring it into other areas of your life and going, okay, what's the thing that's keeping me from letting this come into my relationships or letting this come into my workspace, wherever it is for you. So it's really having that support system there to support you as you step out into a little vulnerability, and you're going to stumble. That's life. And then you go a little more and a little more, and pretty soon you hit that tipping point where it's the rarity that you don't feel safe as opposed to it's the rarity that you do feel safe. And that's the transition point when you're moving through the vulnerability. It takes time. It takes knowing somebody is on your side. So vulnerability is a tough one. It's a project, but it's so worth it because we've all done it. I've done it. When you aren't vulnerable, when you withhold what you have, the whole world's suffering. They know there's something more there. They're desperately wanting it. you're the only person who isn't willing to admit there's more there. So it's owning that, you know what, this is worth it. I have gifts. There's an amazingness inside of me, and that's not going to run out, but it's not going to do anything for anyone if I never share it. So that's why it's so valuable to step into vulnerability, even though it's super uncomfortable, even though it scares the bejesus out of you. Doing that is what lets you be seen, and everybody wants to be loved for who they are. But until you put that out there, no one has the opportunity to do so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that by letting yourself really be seen and letting your light shine, so to speak, fully, so that the right person can see you,
yes,
really see you, that's actually more likely to draw in the right partner for you. But it seems a little counterintuitive because we sometimes feel like we need to morph into or act or be who we think this person would want, or who our ideal man might want, rather than just living fully and brightly and letting our lights shine, so to speak, out there so that they can be seen by the right person. I mean, sometimes, Ken, I just think that one of the big keys for a woman to meet and attract the right man is for her to expand into that space of letting her light shine so brightly that the right man can't help but be attracted to her, as long as she's in a place where she can be seen by him. And yet that feels scary, it feels vulnerable, and it feels somewhat counterintuitive because we want to protect ourselves, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And to add to that, Michelle, I think the key distinguishing point is, are you letting your light shine brightly for them because, oh, if I do this, I'll attract the guy? Or are you doing it for yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're doing it for yourself, you don't have to worry about being judged. You're not going to judge yourself for being yourself.
Right.
So you need to do it for yourself. You're just doing it because that's who you are. You love to do these things. You love to be this way. And then that person that is like, oh my gosh, I've been looking for that. They can see you. But when you don't do that, when you're doing it in a strategic way, oh, I'm going to this event. There's supposed to be some really good looking guys there. So I'm going to show up like myself. Right there, you're not showing up as yourself. Because
Right.
you're doing it for someone else. You
Right.
need to be doing it for you. And that's the big shift point. Because most of the time when we're out there and we're looking for a partner, we're trying to find that guy, what happens? Well, we're doing what we think they're going to want.
Right.
By nature, that's not inherently you. If you're just going out and doing your own thing, I mean, think about it for yourself. Every one of you watching this, you could very easily think of a time where you met a guy. Doesn't matter where the relationship went, but you met a really great guy at some place you had no expectations to, so you weren't ready. You weren't prepared. You hadn't put on the right things and done your hair a certain way, and instead you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they can talk to me. Yes, they talk to you because you were you. Men want to know you. One of the biggest things that draws a man in is authenticity. And we have amazing radar for when you're not being authentic. It's actually why on online dating sites, when they ask guys about, professional photos where they're like glamour shot type, really dialed up, or a photo shoot of some type, guys like, we don't even pay attention to those. They don't count. That's not who I'm going to be with on a daily basis. It's nice, but I don't sit there and go, oh, wow, she can get all dialed up and have hair and makeup done. And that's what I'm going to see. We know better. That's not authentic. It's a nice representation of you, but it's not who we're going to interact with. So authenticity is huge. And that's just bringing your gifts forward and being that bright light.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really important point that you made. And yes, when I talk about you going out there and shining your light, it is from a place of you doing what you're passionate about and what you love. And then we hear these happy stories about people meeting more or less serendipitously or unexpectedly. But in reality, when I look at at what's going on in most of those situations, people were being intentional about the way they were living their lives and doing it from a place of joy and authenticity and even some vulnerability, because they're they're showing that spectrum of who they are by being out there pursuing their passions. So I'm glad that you emphasized that piece. So I know, Ken, because I'm a woman and because I talk to so many women, as do you, that there are women out there that are asking this question right now. And I want to get your male perspective on this.
Yeah.
So, we have all of these events, and a lot of them are catering to women. And I know there's a lot of women that give me feedback and ask me the question, well, do men care about partnership? Do men care about relationships? Are men thinking about this stuff? Because, here we all are looking at all of this again and exploring this again, many of us for the umpteenth time. And at least there's a perception that, I don't know, do men even care about this? Is this even on their radar?
Yeah, I get that question a lot too.
Yeah.
And, the biggest thing is that we just, as men and women, approach it differently. We have different things driving us. We have different ways that we learn, that we grow. And men are very internally motivated. So where, for example, ladies tend to like group events. So you go to a workshop or you get on a telesummit or something like this where there's some type of community. That's, again, that connection that creates safety so that you can grow. And you also get the chance to have cross-pollination of everybody else's experiences, which is another way that validates the feminine so you can move forward. The masculine would rather work on it on their own. So a lot of women will tell me, how come there's no guys at these events? Well, because the event was designed for women. So it would be rare that guys would be drawn to that. There are some. I've certainly gone to them. However, just because they're not doing the work the same way you are doesn't mean they're not doing the work. We have very different approaches to it. And this is one of the biggest things that causes difficulties in relationships, is not understanding the opposite sex and just assuming they should be doing it just like we are. And if they're not, they're acting out. They're purposely not behaving. When the reality is we just operate differently. We're built differently. We're designed to be harmonious, to actually complement each other, not to be the same as each other. And yet we don't understand the other sex. Nobody teaches us this. Nobody teaches us, well, how does a man operate? How does a woman operate? And how does that complement each other? Instead, we sit there going, why don't they do what I do? Mm-hmm. So men are working on this all the time. We just do it differently. Oftentimes, men would rather read a book on their own or watch a video online on their own than go out to a group event. And the other thing is, oftentimes at these events, and I don't know, Michelle, if you're having it for this one, but there'll be a Facebook group or some other kind of supporting community. What happens is women will go, how come none of the guys get on there? Because we don't need that connection. So we're not looking for a community where we can chat and do all those things. And when I've seen people offer some type of community, whether it's a Facebook group or something else, with a men's event, no one's there. Mm-hmm. Because that's not how we're wired. So again, just because we're not operating the same way, we're not doing it the same way you are, doesn't mean that men are not working on themselves. We just approach it very differently. Mm-hmm.
So at a core level, though, Ken, and I know we're speaking in general terms about men here and that everyone's an individual, but on a core level, would you say that partnership and relationships are deeply important to men? Because we already have established that for most women they are. But I think a lot of women really have this as a genuine question.
Yeah, and no, it's a valid question. And yes, it's very, very important for men. And one of the things to recognize is part of what's important in a relationship for a man is to be able to, we're protectors, we're providers, that's what we're wired to do. If the women won, this is where we come back to, getting your needs met. If you're not presenting what your needs are, well, then he doesn't know what to provide. So there's no role for him. And he's looking for someone who's asking him to do what he's designed to do. So you're actually doing him a favor when you're bringing up, what are your needs? Because if he can, he will. Now, the other piece of that is men, if what we're providing, first of all, If we're just having to guess, you're in trouble. Because men are the world's worst guessers. We suck at guessing. We've proven this to you on a daily basis. And yet somehow women still have this hope and dream that they saw it on TV where the guy just knows everything. He just gets you on every level and he can guess your every need. That's not real. That might happen, 1 in 100 times, but that's the exception, not the rule. And the tendency is once that exception happens, ooh, Jim guessed exactly what I needed. See, I knew he could do this. I'm going to expect that from now on. Mm-hmm. So we try and make the exception into the rule when the reality is it's a nice romantic idea, but on a day-to-day basis, having that partnership, which is here's what I need. You set him up to win so he can then provide it, which when he provides it, you get what you want. Everybody wins. If you make him guess, everybody loses. So it's really a partnership aspect. And the only part that you're involved in is your part. And your part is, what do you need to be happy in your relationship? So the more you can provide that, as unromantic as it might sound, and as challenging as it might, if you're going to be in partnership, well, there better be some trust there. And maybe you don't bring out the biggest, most, what do I want to call it, extreme or scary need that you have. Start providing things. Let him know, hey, you know what? I could really use, and you fill in the blank. What is that thing that you need? And work with it so you can find, is there a partnership here? Because partnership it's never easy. You don't fall into partnership like you fall into love. You choose partnership. And so you've got to choose that, yeah, there's going to be some times where there's things that aren't comfortable, like owning what your needs are and telling your partner that. And conversely, he may be like, I have no idea how to do that, but I'm compelled to do it because I love this woman. That's what partnership is. It's doing something bigger than yourself. So the more we can understand that this is a back and forth, and the only piece you can have any control over is your part.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So a key here, it seems, Ken, is first being in touch with your wants and your needs, which is something we already talked about, and then knowing how to express or request what our wants and needs are in terms of partnership. And I agree with you, based on my long dating history and now 10-year marriage, this is a skill that I've had to learn, and I'm still refining, of course, because we're all always learning and growing in relationships and in partnership. But I've found that with my husband, when I have had those expectations that he would just figure it out, then I'm inevitably disappointed. Yet if I make specific requests and I ask instead of demand or require certain things of him, and I also allow him to do it in his own way, and sometimes that means in his own time, then he almost always steps up for me, and it becomes a win-win because I get my needs or my wants met, and he gets to have the reward of me appreciating and thanking him. Mm-hmm. But there's a bit of a skill to be learned there, I've found, because I can remember early on in our relationship, and I think I might have even shared this story with you before, Ken, where we, I just felt like our house was getting dirty and kind of cluttery and just kind of a mess. And I got this big bee in my bonnet one day that it had to be cleaned up right then and there, right now. And my husband was just doing his thing or whatever on the computer. And I started going through the house like a whirlwind, thinking that he would just pick up on the fact that he should join right in. And he didn't. And I was livid, right? Yep. I was just livid. And yet I didn't go to him and say, honey, you know what? I feel really uncomfortable because I feel like our house has become cluttery and messy and I'm just not feeling good here right now. And I would feel so good if we could just join together for a few hours today or tomorrow and take care of this. That would make me feel so much better. Would you help me? And I'm sure he would have done it. But instead, I went about it this other way where I became like this whirlwind through the house. And he probably just thought, wow, look at her go.
Yeah. In his mind, there probably wasn't a spot for him. He was like, I don't want to get in the way of that. I have no idea what her agenda is right now, but I'm getting out of the way so she can just take care of things, whatever
Right.
she needs right now. Yeah, it's a huge, it is a skill. You have to practice it. And I'm sure there's women out there right now going, well, I've never met a guy that wanted to do those things.
Yeah.
And you probably haven't, because you assumed he was going to guess them. That's not providing, that's guessing. When you make a man guess, everyone loses. Write that down, put it on your forehead, whatever you have to do to remember that. It's automatic. Men know we're the world's worst guessers. I'm not telling you a secret. We guessing. When you ask men, what would you like from your partner? Number one thing, every single time, just tell me what you need. I don't read minds. You hear that all the time, because we know we don't read minds. We don't have any illusions that we're going to somehow suddenly become, the amazing Creston and know exactly what you're thinking. We're not. Wow, that was an old reference. But that's why it takes partnership. And you're going to win when you set him up to win. You say, hey, I loved having dinner with you tonight, and it'd be really great to go dancing sometime. Ding! He's like, cool. Next time, take her dancing. That's a guaranteed point. Automatic. You just told him what to get, and guess what? You get to go dancing. That's how it works. You have to partner with them. And the other piece of this, and Michelle, I'm glad you brought that story, because you did tell me that on the podcast, and it was such a great story, is nobody's got this. It's not a natural for anyone, because our instinct is self-preservation. And self-preservation means if I've ever felt discomfort, if I've ever felt pain from that, don't go there again. So yeah, if you put out a need with someone and they smacked you and said, that's the stupidest thing ever, what do you need that for? You're so needy. I'm not doing that again, right? Mm-hmm. It's amazing. And that word, needy, is huge. I can't tell you how many women I've talked to, and they're like, as soon as they said that word, I was shut down. Know that's needs are inherent. Everyone has needs, just like water and sunlight. You have needs. That doesn't make you needy. Here's what needy is to a man. Let me clarify this. Needy is when you continually need to be saved for something you could have done yourself. Mm. The example I like to use for that is, let's say you're someone who, you run out of gas. Every other week, it seems like you run out of gas. You call up your partner, hey, Jim, how's it going? I ran out of gas again. Can you come get me or bring me some gas? Thanks. And he's going, well, there's all kinds of things that would have been just fine for you to do. A, there's this little gauge on your dash that tells you how much gas you have. And when it gets really low, a light goes on. And there's gas stations on every corner to remind you that cars need gas. And yet somehow you still need me to come save you every week. That's needy. Going, I need 10 hours of sleep. That's not needy. That's what you need to be your best person. Mm-hmm. So that's the distinction. If you're using this just to get attention, basically, I need you to come take care of me, that's needy. If you have needs, whatever they happen to be for you, food, water, shelter, love, affection, that's what you need to be your best self. Very different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm so glad you made that distinction, because I do think there is this confusion sometimes that having needs means that we're needy, and those are not one and the same. So I really appreciate you making that distinction. So Ken, another thing that I want to ask your advice and wisdom on is this: can maybe turn into Mr. Right if we know these things? Is that a possibility?
That's a great question.
Yeah, because I know there are women listening to this who are probably saying, well, I wonder if more is possible in this situation that maybe seems like a maybe, if they're in one right now. And probably the answer is yes, sometimes, and no, sometimes. But I want to hear your thoughts on this.
No, I love that question. And obviously, it's not universal. So yes, it is going to be sometimes yes, sometimes no. But the only way you're ever going to find out is owning your needs, because maybes are when your needs aren't being fulfilled. Mm-hmm. So unless you own what your needs are, there's no way he can possibly turn into Mr. Right. It's impossible, because the experience of Mr. Right, I guess this is something else we should distinguish. A lot of people think Mr. Right is a thing. It's this, oh, look, he's Mr. Right. No. Mr. Right is a feeling. Mr. Right is the experience you have with someone when your needs are being met. And you're like, wow, I just love being around this person. It's not about how much hair is on his head or how much money he makes or the car he drives. No, those things are distractions. And what they actually do is create repetitive patterns of the same unfulfilling relationships, because you're chasing forms. Mm-hmm. Mr. Right is the feeling you have when you're with somebody. It's why so many people spend their whole dating life chasing their type. And then they end up marrying somebody who's not their type at all. And they're like, I don't understand. I really don't get it. He's so not my type, but I love him to death. It's because the experience, the feelings you have when you're with him is what made him Mr. Right, not the forms. So that's the key. A maybe can't turn into Mr. Right unless he has the opportunity to fulfill your needs. So as long as you withhold what those needs are, you're making it a no-win game. Nobody can win that. Mm-hmm. You don't win because your needs aren't fulfilled, and he doesn't have the opportunity to be Mr. Right. So it really takes you doing what you need to for you. And again, this isn't you're expressing your needs to get him to be Mr. Right. It's you're expressing your needs because it's what you need. You're doing it for you. And if he steps up, fantastic. If he doesn't, better to know that sooner than later. Again, it comes back to owning what you need to be your best self. That's the whole key. Then he has the opportunity to, if he was a maybe before, know, oh, there's other things that are needed here. Do I want to step up that game or not? One of my best friends, Jeffrey Allen, told me when he met his wife, he was very aware he needed to up his game if he was going to have that work. He didn't know, it wasn't like specifics, but he just knew he needed to play at a different level because she was very clear about what her needs were. And he did, and he can't say enough about how it's the most amazing relationship he's ever experienced. So as much as you may want him to prove he can be Mr. Right before you put your needs out there, it doesn't work that way because he can't be Mr. Right until he knows what your needs are so he can fulfill them. So you have to go first. Sorry.
Yeah, I think that's really important to emphasize. And I'm really glad that you said that, Ken, because I think as women, sometimes we forget the power, and maybe power is not the right word, but the opportunity that we have in a relationship to create what I like to call sacred space. We create the space by letting our wants or needs be known, or making a request, or offering an idea to a man, or asking for his advice, and allowing the space to see how he chooses, or if he chooses to step into that space. Exactly. And I think that's one of the early indicators that can help a woman to know if a man can potentially be a Mr. Right, because if he's not ready for a relationship or partnership, or she's not the woman for him for whatever reason, he's not as likely to step into that space. Whereas like with your friend that you just described, he basically instinctively knew, wow, if I'm going to be in a relationship with this woman, I'm going to have to step up my game, or I'm going to step into this role. That was a choice for him. But we have to allow that space for a man to feel like he has the opportunity to make that choice.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Michelle, because ultimately what happens is if you're not presenting your needs, which in turn means you're presenting your best self, he doesn't know what he's passing on. He has no idea, because I always hear this, I'm sure you do too. Oh, I'm so amazing and I don't know why guys aren't liking this. Well, you never share that part. So they just think you're kind of generic. because that's all you're feeling comfortable sharing. And so he never gets to that. Well, once he showed he loved me more, then I'd share the amazing parts. Well, that's counterintuitive. What's there to love if you're just generic? I can go find another generic version down the road. So it's risky. It's edgy. Face it, the guy's got the risk of asking you out in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got to show up enough to make him interested. Because if it's not interesting, there's lots of other people out there that are, they're okay. Guys are looking for the real you. We want to love that. We want to support that. We want to be your biggest advocate. So let that happen. And it takes practice. It takes trying. It takes, like Michelle was saying, you got to put something out there so you can see if he's willing to step up or not. But if you don't give him anything, and please know, this isn't about a test. You don't have to, here's the challenge. I hope he measures up. No, this is partnership. I'm putting out what I need. I need this whether he's here or not. It's for you to have a life of living your best expression, your fullest self. If you don't do that, who cares if there's a guy? Your whole life is being compromised. And please understand, one of the things that happens when you own your needs, when you are self-expressed, is women emanate something, I call it life force. And every man I've ever met, when you ask them, well, why her over her? They'll be like, I don't know, there's like this energy. Guys don't have the language for it. But that's what we're like, whoa. That life force that comes out of you, that you create and emanate when you're really being your truth, will drop a guy's jaw and he'll just be like, wow, how do I get around that all the time? That's why we want to provide your needs for you, because we get this incredible high. They've actually done research where they did functional MRIs on men's brains while they were watching their partner, their woman, do something she was passionate about, or she was just talking about something she was passionate about, whatever it was. And they didn't even have to, the guys didn't really even have to understand that particular subject. But when she was expressing her passion, there was a download of hormones that gave him this overwhelming feeling of well-being. It's a biological response. This isn't a choice. You have the opportunity when you own your needs and express yourself fully. It's a default. Like if that's their thing, they'll be like, wow, that's incredible. How can I support you in that? We're designed to support each other. The thing that gets in the way is our brains trying to tell us, no, we know better than that. No, we don't. We don't. We need to get out of the way and just be what we need for ourselves and let your partner go, amazing. Or if they're not that guy, good. Get him out of there as soon as you can so you can get to the right guy, right?
Right.
So, yeah, it's really stepping up because that life force is, oh, my gosh, it's gold.
Mm. Yeah, I love how you described that. And again, I think women, we don't always recognize that we actually possess this ability to share that life force. And that comes from the things we've talked about today, being authentic, being real, being vulnerable, letting your light shine in the world, being in that place where you're out there, living your life fully and joyfully, and sharing, being in touch with and sharing your deepest love, wants, and needs. And Ken, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing so generously today. And I want to give you a chance to give us the last word.
Oh, well, thank you, Michelle. And yeah, it's been a pleasure to be here. I love these conversations. You're right. I think you and I could talk for the next 3 weeks.
Yeah, we're both obviously very passionate about this.
Exactly. I think that's what it speaks to, is how committed we are to getting this information out there, helping women to find their right guy. And the biggest thing I would recommend, I think, as a kind of a step away, is events like this are amazing, because what happens is it's kind of like a sampler platter, right? So you ladies are out there and you're watching all these different experts giving their advice and where they're at and what they present. And you get to go, what resonated for me? What was something that I feel this is where I'm at right now? And what I recommend is, this is not easy. Changing human behavior, modifying human behavior is one of the hardest things in the world, because we're creatures of habit. And so we'll naturally, like I said earlier, if there's any discomfort, we'll go back to that familiar space. Even if it's not that comfortable there, it's better than that change is. So get some kind of support, whether it be, following further on somebody that you just listened to. Maybe it's what Michelle's doing. Maybe it's one of the other guests. Maybe it's myself, whoever it is. I offer a webinar specifically on this topic where we go much deeper. And the whole idea is to get this out there so you can actually start applying it. It's hard to do by yourself. You've done your whole life. You've done things that got you to where you are now. And to get out of those habits is tough. So the more support you can get around that, because we've all bought those books and watched the videos and gone, that's a great idea. Maybe we tried it once and it didn't go perfectly. And we went, we put it on the shelf. We need that support system, just like when we're learning to walk. So find what it is for you. Whatever version of that works for you is what I invite you to do. And remember, your needs are what allow your gifts to come forward. So asking for what you need is not a selfish act. Not asking for what you need is when you're being selfish, because you're keeping your gifts to yourself. So please bring your needs forward. Let your greatest self come forward. And that's how a guy who can't wait to feed that fire that is you will find you.
Thank you, Ken. I really appreciate you being here with us, and I really appreciate you ending on that note, because our intention is to give you hope and inspiration, and we're so glad that you've joined us. We congratulate you for joining us, because the fact that you're here sets you apart from all of the other women out there that are not exploring this area of their life so that they can move forward. So we appreciate your presence and participation, and look forward to seeing you on more. Bye-bye for now.